represent sort of that diverse cross-section. As we talk about programming, and we want to hear from all the stakeholder groups, we also want to understand through their lens and sort of how that applies. So we've been meeting with staff. We've been doing some input sessions with staff, a whole series of programming meetings. We took some benchmarking trips. There was a group that went and actually visited some other schools to see sort of what they're doing over there. What success are they having? What did they learn maybe from their new school project? So we can take that input into our planning process. We also do a lot of work with facilities. So we're talking to them, we're talking to the custodian staff. We're talking to the building facilities group and sort of how the systems are working. What do we not want to repeat? What do we want to think about as we go forward? School buildings are thought of as 50-year buildings. So let's not design them for 10 years if they're a 50-year building. So how do we think about that in terms of their systems? We also, you're here tonight. The community is just as important as the others. You're a stakeholder group. And so we want to make sure we hear from that lens too. And so that can start even with the pre-voting engagement, which you were a part of to build up to the Ref 24 projects. But even now, as we have input sessions and town hall meetings, so we're constantly hearing from all those lenses. And then the district, obviously, is an important part, but students are represented. And so we want to think about demographics in terms of the data and how do we plan for the future. Madison is a very dynamic community in terms of growth areas, and how does the locations of the schools support that and better align with that. So this is all representative of sort of the different points of data that we've been collecting, and we're getting more towards the end of this process for the phase 1 schools, but this is what we've been doing to date, is sort of getting all this data and getting that cross-section represented from all the groups. Questions? Please interrupt me as we move along here. So, we've been in a lot of meetings, we've been having a lot of information, so what have we heard? So I'll summarize a little bit about what we've been hearing. So, if you think about some overall points that we're hearing across the board that really aren't specific to a certain site or a certain school, secure vestibules. Making sure that during the school day, we got security built in, so not anybody can walk in off the street. Also, how does that secure vestibule work after school? So we have events and activities that happen in the evenings and the weekends. So we have to think about security and how those different layers work for when the building's being used. Talk about separate entrances. We got 3 combination schools in the Ref 24 project. So Blackhawk Gompers is one of them. So thinking about the entrances, how do you separate the elementaries from the middle school kids and what makes the most sense from both a safety as well as an organization standpoint, right? You want everything to flow seamlessly and to make sure there aren't a lot of congested points or cross sections. We think about mobility, flexible, adaptable learning environments. How can we set up the schools to be able to adapt as you go forward into the future? How do you support and anticipate the things you don't know today? There's some images up here on the wall if you want to look at those afterwards, but representative of different classroom styles. How do we think about making classrooms flexible and so they can be used going forward? And then also universal and inclusive design. I mean, that's paramount on all fronts. And so thinking about how every space can support that. And then that community space is just as important. We're hearing that the schools need to be supportive, not just of their student body in-house, but also the communities that they're within. As we went through our sessions and programming meetings, some of the things we've heard specific more to middle schools. We talked about connectivity, right? In terms of how students cannot feel isolated, like when they're in a classroom, but yet the visibility, safety, connectivity also helps support and promote in terms of new programs, right? Students see other students working on certain things, and then you're like, oh, there's a robotics activity happening, and oh, I like that. So how do I get involved with that? So thinking about resiliency of materials and finishes, they got to be durable, right? Middle school kids can be tough on things, and so thinking about what's the right solution for that in order to make the buildings maintainable and longevity in terms of how they perform. We talked a little bit about overall about flexibility of furniture and technology, but one of the big items coming up is the small group learning activities, right? How do we set up collaborative environments so they can both work in the classroom as well as a little bit outside the classroom, so they can work on small group activities, hands-on activities. Teaching pedagogies have shifted a little bit to not just be lecture-based in a classroom where you're all sitting at desks. Now at sometimes 3 groups of students are doing this activity over here, while a teacher is working with these 2 students over here on maybe something a little bit different. So how can we support those spaces? How can we design those spaces to support those different activities? And then student services suite. So that's part of being able to support the students, whatever the need is, across the board. So in phase 1, we also have a small high school component. And so thinking about what we heard there in terms of unique identities, separate entries, flexible classroom spaces, as well as storage. Storage is going to come up a lot. And so as you think about the different space types and how we can support all different, whether education is happening inside or outside. We think about CTE and unified arts. So this applies differently whether you're looking at an elementary age group or you're looking at a middle school age group. Elementary age groups have maker spaces that allow them to be creative in terms of working with different materials. At the same time, those are those maker labs. At the same time, middle school students might have something that's more aligned with robotics or computers, programming. So thinking about how we can have classroom space that can flex depending on what those activities are. Clean labs can be more along the lines of some computers. Don't be thinking exactly like clean labs in terms of healthcare or something like that. But as we also got to think about performance space with the fine arts, whether it's instrumental music or even a theatrical unit, thinking about how can we work in a performance space. Even though these middle schools won't have a program of a theater itself, but there are ways we can incorporate performance space so that they can have a 7th grade band concert and have a big enough space for an audience to participate. And then athletics, as we think about that, we've heard wood competition courts. So that gives the district flexibility, whether it's a PE activity during the day or it's an MSCR activity that's outside of school or on the weekends. Having that hardwood competition court gives them flexibility to use the gyms for different uses. It has come up that we don't need at this level to support concession programs, but we need to make sure we got spectator seating. So what's the right number? They're not going to be a high school performance gym, but they still need to accommodate spectators to come in for the different events. Restrooms with changing spaces as well as access to outdoor fields.
And storage.
Storage comes up across the board. All right, so that sort of represents some of the things we've heard today. Any surprises, or do you see anything missing?
I like the idea, 2 things. One, investment here on the north side is very exciting. And I saw that you had some interesting feedback from the high school, and I like that you're talking to several middle schools. What did you learn from when you met with the Samuel Gompers staff that was unique to elementary school?
I think what we heard most with elementary school is the schools are schools within schools today. The schools are large. They could have 300 students, 400 students in them. And what we heard is that sense of belonging in terms of how we organize the education spaces to create neighborhoods so those students don't feel like they're necessarily in a big school. It allows the teachers to be more flexible in terms of how they support them, but that need to be able to use their space in more creative, adaptive ways. So that came out with the elementary age group. We also heard a lot from the elementary age group, but about not wanting first graders in the same corridor circulation spaces or crossing over with 8th graders or 7th graders. So we talked a lot about that in terms of how you can be a combo school, even though you're not two separate buildings, but how you can really design it to support specifically for that age group. So I would say those are the first two things that were probably paramount from most of them, is being able to have a collection of spaces to be able to teach in a more collaborative way. Any other questions?
I'm curious about where in the school the gyms are being planned on being built. Are the gyms for Gompers and Blackhawk going to be back to back? Are they going to be separate completely? Are they going to be in the center of the school? Are there going to be like natural lighting versus like all artificial? How is storage going to work for the gyms? Is it going to be all gym storage? Because right now, I know you said storage comes up a lot, and the storage we have right now is a combination of custodial, administrative, staff, and XYZ. And how big is it? Is it going to be a comparable size to what we have right now?
So
Do you have
let's.
any information on that?
Yep, so we don't have the schools designed yet. So we can't be so specific as to what the final plan is. But I can tell you what we've heard and sort of what we're thinking about planning when it comes to gyms. We recognize at the combo schools that you need 2 gyms. And when I say 2, that means divided by a wall. I don't know if the wall is beside each other or there's spaces between them, but the point is you need 2 separate spaces, because the elementary students need to be able to have PE at the same time as the middle school students. And a large gym with just a curtain divider does not meet that need. So we've heard that. We've also heard for the middle school gyms to be large enough to be able to support multiple PE classes at the same time. So they will be sized to be able to have multiple courts happening at once, which means divider curtains.
Okay.
So we've heard that. Spectator seating was on here. We've heard a need for spectator seating at both. I don't know that they will be the same size. One will probably be larger than the other one, but that you need spectator seating at both. So in terms of where they're at in relation to the floor plan, I can't answer that question at this point. But at least you know from a programming standpoint, that's sort of where what we've heard about the gyms.
Okay.
We've also heard that the gym and the cafeteria cannot be the same space. So I know, I just saw some hands clap. So I know at this school specifically, there's a lot of conversation about managing the schedule, right? How not to have lunch at 9:30 in the morning because you've got to get so many students through the cafeteria for the lunch period. So thinking about separate cafeteria spaces so the elementary kids are not eating right next to the middle school kids. There's probably like one kitchen, but it probably serves 2 ways or something like that. So you can have simultaneous lunch programs at the same time. So we've talked a lot about those things in terms of how that affects the operation of the school. But like I said, we're not far enough along to tell you what the floor plan looks like yet.
Right.
So one of the things I dig into when I drive around Madison is not going into a lot of the schools, obviously. I get to see the outside of that. And what I don't see on any of these is what you're going to talk about for green spaces around the schools. My kid goes to Lakeview and they've got that wonderful forest area right there. And what that grants them and people in the community is the ability to walk through that and kind of experience that as a mental break from traffic noise, from kids playing on the playground. They go into the trees and just be a little bit of a separation. It's like a curtain in the gym room, but it's a tree. And it makes it much better. You talked about a 50-year plan. Those trees are 200-year plans. So you kind of have to think about, you might have to take the tree down in order to expand the building in 100 years when you only have so much property, but you've now got 1,100 kids in the school. But at least I'm just wondering what you're going to look at for those kind of things.
So, and like I keep saying, we're early in the
Right.
planning process, right? But you're a perfect segue for our next section, so let's
That's
just,
what I try to be.
let's just go there. Let's just go there. So, early planning, but once again, this is how we're thinking about site organization. You just asked about green spaces and thinking about how that works. The existing building is roughly right here. So as we think about site organization, the new school footprint is naturally going to the north. We're also thinking about circulation in order to how to manage the school bus traffic as well as the parent drop-off pickup traffic. You don't want those two traffic patterns crossing or sharing the same thing. It's too congested. There's a lot of school safety research out there in terms of the benefits of separating that school bus drop-off from that parent drop-off. So you can see there are 3 loops right now in terms of how we're thinking about the site. This isn't final by any means, but we are thinking about how can we separate those school buses from those parents. We also know at this site particularly, Wyoming Way is a small residential street, and it gets a ton of traffic at certain times of the day. So we're also thinking about how to manage that, what makes the most sense. Wheeler Way is the street to the north, which is a lot higher traffic, but there are definite access points that probably are gonna make sense in terms of separating that traffic on the site. And also, how do we relieve that Wyoming Way? So those are some of the things we're thinking about right now. The other thing, because this is a combo school, how do we separate the entrances? So we're also thinking about that as well. And I know you have separate entrances sort of now, but that's where you see those red arrows on both sides of the building. So one side of the building is probably primarily an elementary entrance, and that's where that secure vestibule would be, that welcoming center would be for those elementary students coming into the building. But the other side of the school would be the middle school entrance. So those students aren't coming in the same front door in terms of how, and even the parents or the visitors to the school. So how do we manage that flow of people? Because Blackhawk Gompers combined is a good sized school. So those are some of the things we're thinking about currently in terms of how to organize that. You can see we're also making sure we do have planned green space. This site has quite a bit of green space with it. And so once the new building is positioned there, that allows this southern part to have a lot of green space opportunities. We also know with an elementary, you gotta have age-appropriate playground spaces. So we gotta think about how do we provide that outdoor activity space for all age groups, whether it's the 4K learners or it's the 8th graders. So thinking about how do we separate that. So that's why you see maybe there's some green space up there on the north side. There's some larger green space here on the south. But these are all things we're trying to process right now as we think about organization and how we look at this site. Does that help answer your question?
It gets me there, yeah.
Okay.
Where are you citing the teacher parking?
So parking is
Are
is
they
not
all
shown.
on bicycles?
No, well, they could be, but parking isn't shown yet. So as we think about site organization, we don't forget about parking, but we also try to look at some of the circulation things first. And then parking, we'll have to work with the city to determine what's the right size parking lot, right? These schools don't have parking that equals the number of staff or parking that equals the number of parents that come. So we just have to work with the city to balance out what that number is and where that best fits. But we do need some accessible parking and visitor parking if we have 2 entrances at both entrances. So that's something we have to provide.
What will happen to the community garden?
I don't know that answer yet.
There will be one at the end.
Mhm.
2 green dots in the upper right corner are for garden.
Is right where that's at. Yeah.
But that is something we will be having back as community gardens.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That upper red loop that you have there, how many feet from the corner of Wheeler and Comanche is that loop gonna come in?
I don't know that I have that answer yet. So,
Is there a key part of your, is
Is
your
that-
question more, or what?
Well, the question is, I'm the second house and the baseball diamonds in my backyard, and the last thing I want is a parking lot. Obviously, anybody would want, you know,
Yeah.
school's a different thing, but I
yeah,
hope that you realize that the runoff
Yeah.
also comes to every single one of those houses that run right along.
correct.
So I was just curious, you
Yeah.
know, what I'm gonna have in the future.
Yeah, I will tell you, the red color is the bus loop.
Right.
So in terms of a focused area of parking, not necessarily with the bus loop. But we're at the early stages, which your input right now is good timing. Because we don't have all those things figured out yet, but we want to hear from all of you as to what's most important.
If I can add, we also work with the city and stormwater management. So they are intricate in this process. So we've gone through the first round and they've addressed us, like you must follow this pattern. This must slope this way and all of, you can't have excess runoff. If you do, you must partition and put buffer. So they have been working exclusively with us to make sure this is a delicate area.
Well, whatever they're doing now.
And they know that too. They said, well, that's what we need to improve.
We get 4 inches of rain and the water comes down like a waterfall.
Yeah, and they told us, well, we will improve the site, we have to. So that is definitely on the docket.
I have a question. I'm a parent of current scholars, and I think my question is just like, once everything's decided, it sounds really great, like there's gonna be a lot of rooms and availability to flex where students need to go, and maybe some like new spaces. How does that get fed to the right group at MMSD for considering the support that the staff needs here? I've worked closely with like Ebony, Deirdre, and Sue, and we've made a lot of like really positive gains here in the last year. So I'm wondering how the new space then gets incorporated into thinking about like the allocations for staff numbers. Like it's great if you have the space, but you need the people, you need the adults in the room with the kids. So how does that later come down to the process?
Yeah, I think Cindy will address that.
I was pointing back to my
Oh,
column
okay.
too. You want me to take it or I got it? I'll do it.
You got it, Cindy.
I got it.
Thank you for that question. I think that's a really important question, and I think we've heard that from staff as well. And that's part of what our commitment needs to be as we create these CTE spaces, as we create these art spaces. And also, you know, the idea that the enrollment might grow, and as enrollment grows, staff has to change as well. And, you know, we want this to be a destination school. We want to rebrand our school over here to make sure that everybody wants to come here. So when we think about those pieces, we are also thinking about the staffing needs as well. I know that's hard to say coming off of, you know, us going through some staffing adjustments right now based on enrollment, but we also know that as the enrollment changes here and as the programming needs change here, that is part of our overall considerations for how we'll make decisions around allocation and just budget needs in general, outfitting the spaces as well.
So it's like numbers are given to some other like team or department, and that's considered in maybe like some sort of scorecard, like what kind of weight does that kind of hold?
Can you say that again or differently? Same
Like
one.
where in the process would we get that information? Like, I
Oh,
understand
like
it
in
might be
this
really
process?
early. Yeah, I understand
Oh.
it might be early now, but like where is that? 'Cause like that's
Oh.
something I wanna keep my
Yeah,
eye
yeah.
on as a supporter of Blackhawk.
Yeah.
To make sure that those kind of things, I mean, A, aren't cut, but B, are increased where
Yeah.
they should be to help utilize the space
Yeah.
to its maximum.
Probably
use.
this time next year, we'll be having those conversations. The idea, wait, is that right? No.
No, fall.
I'm sorry.
This fall.
I'm one year ahead. I'm really anxious for Blackhawk Gompers to reopen. This time in 2 years, as we're planning for the opening of the new school in fall of '27. Obviously leading up to that, but that will probably be the most specific time. But I think throughout the next 2 years, we're going to continue to come back to the community. We're going to continue to have these conversations, but where we'll be making more concrete details related to the questions you're asking will be the spring of '27 before the opening. Does that answer the question?
I mean, I think so. It gives the when, I guess if I could ask a follow-up question.
Sure.
Like, for the people, maybe if this resonates with you here, like what should they be doing? Like, what should we be doing to support our scholars and make sure that while we have the new space, we're able to like use it to its full potential? And it's not like, great, we have all this space, but we can't have kids obviously alone in this room. We need the adult staff here to support that. Like, what should we do if that speaks to us?
Yeah, I think we should continue to stay in communication over the next 2 years to work through that. This is one community input session, but this isn't the only time we're going to come together. So we can also work with Sue and think about other ways to create kind of subgroups from here and follow-ups along the way over the next 2 years to continue those conversations, for sure. And input.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Yes,
Can I say
Melinda.
something real quick?
Of course, come on.
It will be
You want the
brief.
mic?
We're on a schedule.
I know. People are hungry.
Yes.
Good evening, I'm Melinda Heinrichs, I'm president of the Madison Public Schools Foundation. Advocacy is one of our core programs. We manage referenda campaigns. We are intensively working on legislative outreach because management of the district is always going to be constrained by what the state is making available. So if that doesn't change, then it makes the staffing allocation more challenging. So if anyone is interested in helping with that statewide outreach, those are where the solutions are, is in that state capital. So management can only do so many things with the constraints. So I just wanted to make you know there is a partner here working with the district to champion our public schools and getting every dollar our kids deserve. Thanks.
And I would just say, yeah, thank you for that, Melinda. Larger advocacy beyond the school district is really important. And I can make sure that Melinda's information gets to Sue and Mycia, and we can get it out to others if that's of interest as well.
Thank you.
Okay, back to Susan.
All right. So the other thing we have to share is, like I said, we're high level. We're at that early ideation stage. But the other thing we have to share is these are the graphics that we have at this point. This sort of represent, this would be looking from the north, so represent the ability to engage the hillside. One thing Gompers Blackhawk has is topography across its site. So if you think about here, there's a lot of topography that kind of crosses right through here where that building is. And so we look at that as an exciting opportunity to think about maybe the north side feels like a one-story school, and then the south side would open up to be more like a two-story school. So it's a little bit different in terms of depending on the angle you're looking at the building, but it helps us think about how we can fit it into the community better, how we can relate better. Maybe that north side is that elementary entrance, so that building doesn't feel so big and daunting to them. And then the other piece about this site specifically is the opportunity. This is a cross-section looking from north to south, but there's a vista from this site that's absolutely beautiful. So when you get up to that sort of tall, higher area on the site, this is the existing building, but after the new building's built and that's gone, this could be the potential view. So a lot of the things we're thinking about in terms of how we position the building, sort of where it fits, and also that circulation I was showing in terms of how to navigate the number of vehicles and how everybody moves around the site. All right. Questions?
That view that you mentioned, like top or high level thinking there, that's gonna be like maybe the middle school exit. Just because I don't have the orientation in my mind, but that's the two-story south exit.
Correct.
They see that view, okay.
That would be the middle school entrance and exit primarily versus the north side if we align the elementary with the one-story side.
Yeah.
Questions?
I'm the PE teacher here. As someone who really values the green space right now, and I understand we have a lot of space and we should utilize it, and I like your idea of the two-story building, but it just looked like the parking lot with the buses, it just looked like it was eating up into so much of our green space, and then the bottom part too. Like, as I feel like we should be concerned about kids getting on and off the bus, but that's like a 2-time-a-day thing, and I'm outside 4 or 5 hours a day. You know, so having an open space is like really important, and as I'm trying to navigate that, having a parking lot here, having a parking lot here, trying to be in the middle, it sounds like it might be getting a little claustrophobic, but maybe I'm not seeing the whole picture yet.
No, we'll take that in, I mean, that's an excellent comment, and that's the type of input we want to hear at this point, because we don't have all those pieces figured out yet.
I agree with him. I think the size of the loops is a little bit wide considering, it's just a loop pretty much. So if that can be rerouted or like condensed a little bit,
Okay,
that would probably flow a little bit better.
all right.
Ask the bus drivers,
Not
how much
really.
space they need.
Question in the back.
Yeah, so obviously, I guess, what would the transition look like for the children going to school when this new building's being built in their backyard? Because it is going to be where their current playground is and all of the other things. So is there a plan for that time and transition, and when will that be finalized?
Yeah, so there's gonna be a multiple phase plan of transition. Because, as you know, there's a lot of construction activity that's gonna have to happen as well while the school is currently in session. So there'll be a lot more to come on that once the plans get a little more finalized. We have our CM partners on board, so they'll also bring their coordination of information at future meetings, so you'll hear about sort of what are their plans in terms of navigating that transition and making sure the site stays safe, as well as managing disruptions as best we can. So there's a lot more to come on that. We're just not to that point in the project yet. But all things we want to be paying attention to.
My kid just really loves the outdoor time, so it's a huge consideration.
Yeah.
So are you doing any traffic studies on Wheeler? And the drawing looked like, maybe it's the elementary loop coming, around that it's almost directly across from exits out of Cherokee Garden condominiums. And it just seems like it's already, when you're coming out of there, have to wait for traffic, and then you don't have traffic coming at you. So it seems, and there's curves there, as you know, in the road, it just seems not the best place to have a lot of traffic.
So as we're starting to talk about where the circulation points are at, as well as where these curb cuts are at, we've had 2 meetings now, and we'll continue to have more with the City of Madison's traffic group and transportation group. And I'll be honest, we don't necessarily get to say where the curb cut is going to be at and sort of where those loops are in terms of where they interact with Wheeler Way, because the City of Madison's transportation group and traffic, they're doing the studies, and they're the ones who are sort of telling us, okay, you can connect at this point, but not this point. So we're working with them as a teammate. So I just wanted to say they're doing traffic studies with the schools and working on their side. At the same time, we're doing our planning on our side, and so we're collaborating with them.
Is there a way to give feedback directly to them?
I assume the city has feedback points.
I guess I want to keep reminding everybody, because I appreciate the comments on loops and stuff. These are pretty diagrammatic ideas, so those pieces, those will probably be more refined even in the next meeting, so we'll be able to be more specific what we might know. So absolutely, I think that feedback loop still comes through this kind of meeting, and we're going to take that into effect. We try to influence as much as we can because we care about it too, and the district cares about it.
We've asked,
But there's another party in there, so we have to work with the city.
we can bring that up at the next DAT meeting, and also the crosswalks where they may fall into place, because that'll also affect the impeding traffic.
We greatly appreciate that kind of feedback. You don't live here every day to know exactly what it looks like. We're trying to get caught up on it.
And
That's
some
those
of the
details that are great to hear about.
Yep, and some of these points of access to and from the site, they may be right turn only, or something like that. I mean, there's also conversations of, don't always think that everything is you can go right or left. So some of them are maybe a one-way loop where you can only turn right to help manage so that they don't back things up or cause more congestion where unnecessary. So those are all part of the conversation right now in terms of how we think about managing the impact to the community.
And we
work quite hard on that, on traffic flows on schools, right? It's very important to make sure it's safe and managed.
It's just kind of hard to, you know, not know what's gonna happen. That's the hardest part. Granted, there's only just a few houses, like I said before, but our house values are gonna die if all of a sudden there's a parking lot in the back. I mean, taking that into consideration, no, but there's a few, you know, you gotta save everybody, you gotta, you know. I
Also, a good
understand
chance
that,
they
but
increase as well with a
Well-
brand new school. Excuse me. I said there's also an opportunity, that sometimes property values increase with a brand new school, if people want to put their school.
it just depends on, I guess, how far from the fence line in is gonna be all, whatever's up there.
Yeah, I think we'll have more refining as we start to, especially stormwater has a big effect to that. You have to have enough green space to absorb water, so that may take a lot of that as well, so. Hopefully fix some of your problems you have now.
Well, I mean, it's not so much the progress, you know, this property value, that's the reason I came tonight. I support the whole school system, and don't get me wrong there. It's just not knowing what's gonna happen in my backyard. You know, instead of Saturday morning girls t-ball, what's gonna be there in 2027? Could there be a big brick wall? Could there be a school that kids living down? Hey, that guy's cooking. So I hope you understand where I'm kind of coming from.
Yep. So hopefully you keep attending these input
Oh, I'm
sessions
gonna,
because you're gonna see more and more development as we progress.
I was here when they tried to put the 70-foot jungle gym in out there where the gardens are. They wanted to put a cell tower in there. Yeah, it wasn't very. But I'm glad they put the garden in.
And I encourage you to keep looking at the website. We have
Yeah, oh, yeah.
the 24 website. As we see more development, we share that kind of periodically every month and kind of share where we are and the more sessions we have. Feel free to send us a Let's Talk and ask questions and you get somebody to answer. Right? I'm usually the one that answers those questions.
Thank you.
Another thing you might want to keep in mind, our neighbors up on that way, it's an end-of-life nursing home. So noise control would be something you consideration too. And they have ambulances 24 hours a day coming and going, which could be a difficult discussion with a little kid, why is the ambulance always there?
Well, you guys mentioned that the enrollment might go up with this new school. Just curious, would that be like district lines changing or more kids open enroll or kind of, what are you thinking for that?
So, we are doing reviews of boundaries, right? Just because there is a lot of congestion in certain pockets, right? So we're looking at building a school large enough to maybe alleviate some pressure from other schools. Of course, we got the big Ramish development that's coming just over the hill or around the corner. All right, so we're planning for some expansions for that. And then also like, what is the next spot, right? We don't know, but we're taking educated guesses, right? Doing a simple math thing. I think Cindy and I was wondering, okay, 300,000 people, 25,000 students, 1 out of every 12 has a student. Okay, so we can plan for 50 more, right? Or how many comes to this school? So we don't want to get too big. It just
That's the nice
becomes,
thing about numbers is
yeah.
they're small.
Right, and also you don't have unutilized space, right? You want to have something being occupying those space, but enough to flex if you get bigger. So we're balancing that act right now of what it looks like, and then also, can we help other schools that are already tight? And can we maybe move slightly, potentially, or secondary programs to help pull them away from schools? So every kid doesn't walk in and now I have too many in the classroom, or I have too many kids in my school. When we have a good learning center here, as we look to the future, what Madison might be, other schools. Right? So what can we do to help every school, not just this school?
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
So follow up off that, what is your anticipated size of occupancy for this new school?
Great question. So currently, full building size will be around 550 to to 600 something. We don't know the exact number. We are still working through what the programming looks like, also what the community is looking like. So as we start to look at what the new developments are coming and the changing of class size and birth rates are down. So we have to find this balanced equation. We're getting some outside help, and also internally, we have a short period of time to make those decisions, and it's been moving between 500 to 650. So right now it's leaning somewhere kind of in the middle. Again, you don't want to get too big because you have a lot of space you may not use depending on what's happening. But also anticipating, yep, if they're going to do that at Ramish, there's another one right there too. So let's plan for that might show up just in case, but we got to look 20 years out, right? We're getting beyond where we're living, but we don't want to say, hey, by the way, we want you guys to pay for another restaurant so we can add on to this school because we missed it, right? So we want to be cautious of being both ends of it. But it may not answer your question fully, but we're right around 600-ish.
Yeah.
There's another question here.
Yeah.
Roughly how many square feet are in this building?
Yeah, we should know that top of our head. We don't have our cheat sheet with us.
Not big enough.
We're looking at 10 at once, so.
The new building is around 160-ish thousand square feet. I think this one combined is about 110.
I was gonna get this.
So about 40% more, give or take. And it's moving a little bit depending on the programming and the size and how we can shape the building a little bit differently. And we're also trying, we talk about storage, right? Can we use the hillside, put storage under the building to help the district alleviate some of the storage pressures too, and not take away from educational space? So some of that may flux just because we can be very smart and it doesn't cost anything to have it inside in the bottom of the casement of a hillside. So it doesn't cost us extra to do what we need to do to help other schools in the district. Any questions? These are great questions. All right.
Sorry, any energy efficiency things going into the building?
Definitely.
Yeah, so we have Brianna Crackler, she's our new sustainability manager, just recently started, you may have heard about it. So we are looking to do geothermal as one of our big moves. We are challenging the city because we're in a wellhead preservation area, so we're fighting in two of our particular sites to make sure we can do either conventional or what we call Darcy systems. And there's some challenges of one set versus the other. We're actively looking to do offset of energy costs. That is our initiatives, no greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. This is part of that initiative, right? We can't just put a building in and say, oh, we're going to change it. It's time to put the money up front and do it right. And do that stuff for the environmentally sustainable, including green building materials, sustainable materials, low carbon footprint. Don't put something up that's going to fall apart in 10 years. That just adds to the footprint, the issues, right? Do it right, do it once.
Yeah, so there's two sides to that. So as we design, we're looking at that during construction as well, in terms of our designs. But then there's also the operational side going forward. So right now, our design team is addressing both of those with how we're thinking about systems and how the performance, we set up the building to be for the long term.
Great questions.
As you move forward with this project, and eventually you'll have to probably do value engineering, how are you establishing priorities? So for instance, we've talked about having separate entrances, and I certainly understand separate student entrances. I'm not sure that we would need 2 visitor parking lots, 2 visitor entrances during the day once school has started. We've also heard storage talked about a lot, and my experience tells me that with storage, it's like if you build it, they will fill it. And so if you were to go to probably most Madison schools and look at what's in the storage, there's stuff that hasn't been touched for many, many years that should be pitched. So making sure that we're prioritizing the instructional space that our kids are going to use versus adult storage space and separate entrances, separate parking lots that are going to take some of that green space away. So just wanting to raise that there are priorities and making sure that, you will never build enough storage space in a school.
Correct.
But you also have to have enough storage space to be able to flex your classrooms as far as labs. So you can say, hey, we changed this from a biology to chemistry lab, you can do that. And then have the ability to move instructional materials on, not, like you said, dumping grounds.
Yeah, to address the priority question, the design team does not make that decision by ourselves. So we work with Cindy and her team. We also work with the staff to be able to have those conversations, to understand where that pushing and pulling will happen. I will tell you, modern school design has more flexible spaces in it than assigned spaces. So by putting in the right number of flexible spaces, and we're talking to the principals, we're talking to the staff, we're talking to the teaching and learning group about what that right number is based on their programming and their curriculum plans. But allowing those spaces to be flexible helps us to not have to prioritize to the point of, do we have 2 chemistry labs versus 2 biology labs? We're gonna have a flexible science room that can be used a lot of different ways. So that helps us not over-design, but also to give them flexibility going forward so that we don't have to get in too severe of a priority conversation because we just have too many classrooms overall. So those are things that we're trying to work through in programming to make sure we can meet the needs, but also to give them flexibility going forward. Because you're right, we can't afford to build the wish list of, you know, every space that we could possibly need for the next 20 years.
And I would just say the only thing I would add to that is that we also don't know what is going to be possible in 20 years from now. The world of what students are desiring, what students need for the future is ever evolving when you think about technology and STEM and everything else. So we want to create spaces also that allow for adaptability over time, knowing that we need these buildings to last far beyond all we
Yeah.
With the tariffs involved, and the price of construction going up, are you guys gonna run out of money? And you're gonna ask for money in a couple years?
That is the billion-dollar question, but I will tell you.
I don't, are you gonna run out of money before you're done?
As of right now, we're working through some very key initiatives as far as getting stuff purchased sooner than later and offsetting tariffs and inflation, right? So we know as we're doing our 50% schematic design is we need 45 air handlers, get them now. And get it secured, get the price locked so we don't see that 3%, 2%, 5%, 10%. Oh, by the way, tariff came 45%. So we're gonna get it sooner before the world starts to potentially, we say, unravel. So we're doing those pre-buyings and pre-sets so we don't run into inflationary risks and have the ability to store those materials with Findorf and Vogel Group saying, we got warehousing, let's get it, we know we have it, we know the price. Not come back later, oh, we have 40 different air handlers, we have to do 40 different ones now because we had to get a better price. It doesn't help us for maintaining and maintenance. We get them, we know what they are, and it's the same in all of our buildings. And we know like a pump is a pump, that's the one we use, we have it secured. So we're looking at that pre-buy and making sure that when we design it, yep, we need all of these. Let's go now and one, leverage material cost and the pricing value and the bulk buy, and also offset that inflationary because people are looking for work and saying, I don't know what's going on, and we're like, we have this, we're already having those early conversations with the suppliers, saying we expect this price, don't play the game, but this is what we're gonna lock to, so we can mitigate that risk.
I just want to add, in discussions about tariffs, making money, sure we have money for the third phase, how do we prioritize? As a team, the architects and contractors will develop contingency buckets of money for things that we don't have as unknowns, and that is a safety net. And the architects and contractors make sure that that safety net has, we'll call them the design alternates, things that would be good to have if the tariffs don't happen. If something else doesn't happen, how do we smartly spend that money so we don't just have money at the end of the project, say the tariffs didn't happen, we end up with a bunch of extra money and now we can't buy square footage or we can't buy anything. So they will come up with time and money-sensitive design options, and some of those could be playgrounds or site work or things that you can choose at a later date when you see what happens with tariffs. And it's all part of a very large kind of program system that we're looking at, and that's why we don't build for another year and a half and the contractors are here, they're part of the team. They help develop how do we address these concerns. I guarantee they're getting emails bi-weekly from vendors, suppliers saying, hey, what about steel? Hey, notification, this is happening. They're aware and they're telling us and it's being planned for and it pushes and pulls on what we can design and what we can do. But it's addressed and there's no immediate concern of running out of money based on somebody somewhere making obscure decisions.
The good thing is we're having it now, not halfway through. We're able to plan ahead to understand where those implications might arise.
Plus, everyone in this room went through similar, if not worse, situations in COVID, and if that taught us anything, it's planning, preparing, and coming up with plans B and C. And I mentioned it before, the team here is absolutely some of the best. They're not new, this is their first rodeo, they're fantastic.
Great question.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Good luck with what they find in the ground, because this used to be a junkyard.
Yeah. We're hoping to find some treasures, right?
It was right on the corner, this was a courtroom.
Yeah.
And there was no weed, or going all the way up, it was up, graduate,
Stop
and
down,
down.
right down. Yeah.
And right here on the corner, what did everybody do? Threw it in the pit? So, make sure to let me know when you get about 8 to 10 foot done. They ain't baby down there.
Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Please enter the QR code. Please dab a few squares at the back. And please ask whatever questions you have, even if they come up later, through the QR link over there for the red square on the district website.